What's up, No Nation? It's Cruton season, Michael. The staff is out working the trail, trying to put some things together from the high school ranks. We've talked a lot about the portal over the last few weeks, but it's high school recruiting time. And just when you think they're done with 2025, keep in mind, Michael, early signing day, which is actual now signing day, is not the last signing day. The
That's
actual
right.
signing day, which is pretty much now late signing day, is still out there in February. So we have some new commitments for Florida State for the 2025 class because they are not done yet putting
Mhm.
together that 2025 class. So we have a couple of commits to talk about, a couple of top targets. The staff has been really active out on the trail. And we're also going to start a new segment going forward starting this week. You know, we've talked a ton about Florida State over the past few weeks, the comings, the goings, the changes at the program. But it's time to start turning our focus to some other opponents out there. Looking ahead to the schedule in 2025, we're going to start doing some way too early look aheads at some of the opponents. And we're going to start this week with none other than the rival, AKA the dumpster fire down south, Miami. And they, as you guys know, they just got Carson Beck. And so we're going to talk about what that means for them, what that means for us, and some thoughts on the program as a whole as they've made some changes too. So before we jump into that, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, man. It is it is Cruton season, and just when you thought you could put the nail in the coffin on the 25 team, boom, we come back at you with a couple more commits. And then of course, Scum U, as I like to refer to them, won the Carson Beck trophy. So we'll talk about that, and because that's the only trophy they won this year. And,
Exactly.
and we'll get into all of that. So looking forward to the episode, man.
Yeah, and before we jump into things, I do have one quick announcement that I want to get to that most of you are probably already aware now. At the Vision of Excellence presentation, it was announced that there will be no spring showcase for 2025. And of course, as most of you guys know, that is due to the ongoing stadium renovations. Now, if you went to the spring game last year, and really the construction was one of the reasons that I didn't go because it looked like you couldn't get anywhere close. You had to be shoved up there, up in the top rows and stuff and crammed into one section. Well, this year it's because they got, to borrow a phrase from our famous alumni, Burt Reynolds and the Smokey and the Bandit movie, Michael, we got a long way to go and a short time to get there.
That's
So
right.
they got to stay hard at work. So there is going to be no spring game this year due to that stadium construction going on. Now, they did say they plan on things being done by kickoff versus Alabama. And so I know it's a disappointment for some of the people that were planning on attending that. It's a disappointment for us because it's really, as non-credentialed media, it's our one chance to
Yeah.
get a look at this team in person. And there's not a whole lot that you can glean from that because it is basically a glorified practice more than it is a spring game.
Right.
But there were a few notes and takeaways after last year that
Yep.
that raised some red flags for us that we just won't get to see this year. And so we're going to have to rely on other sources which didn't work out that great last year.
Right.
So no spring game this year. They did talk about moving it, but due to the calendar of events, it may have caused them to miss a couple of practices or shave a day off there. And you know what, Michael? Right now, more than I need to see this team, they need some practice. So
Exactly.
get all of it that you can. And then honestly, man, the last thing thought on this I'll throw back to you is for most of us, man, just get this daggone stadium done because I'm
Yes.
tired of Doak being ripped apart. I'm ready for it to get back to the way that we know and we love it. It's going to look different, but I'm
Yeah.
tired of it being a kind of a construction mess. So you know what, man, whatever they got to do, let's just get these renovations done.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, man. Just going to the game last year, I only went to one game, and it was the game they won. Was Cal game, and just to be a part of that, like it just did not feel good. Didn't feel like Doak.
Right.
Didn't have the same amount of energy. The fans. Listen, this is not about the fans. The fans brought it every single opportunity they had, but it just wasn't the same because of all the construction and everything that was going on within the stadium. So yeah, let's get it back to where it needs to be. And I understand why FSU is not doing the spring game for people like us who we don't have credentials, we can't go to practice. It hurts us a little bit because now we have to rely on the words of other people, and then even that, take it with a grain of salt. So, but I totally understand that we don't want them to miss practices. As you said, Jesse, we need them to practice every bit. We need them to
Yeah.
cheat and practice when they're not supposed to be practicing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we want them to have all 15 of those practices, and then now they'll be able to have a 16th with not having a spring game. They'll be able to use it as their normal practice. And so, yeah, I totally understand it. I'm bummed for the people who love going to the spring game. There's only 2 times in the entire year that you can get on the field after the last home game and then after the spring game is over. And I know there are so many people who love to be able to walk that hallowed ground of floors of Bobby Bowden Field, but unfortunately won't be able to get to do that this spring.
Yeah, and I was disappointed, man, because they didn't let us do it after the Florida game last year either,
Oh, I did not
because
realize that.
that was one of
Okay.
the reasons I went because I was like, well, it's probably going to go well, but at least I get to be on the field afterwards. Nope, not at all. But like you said, man,
Uh,
got to get those practices in. Hey, Mike Norvell, I got an idea. Maybe let's dress all the players as construction workers and get them out on the field practicing. The rest of the guys are working on the stadium, and there's just a random group of about 50 guys over there throwing a football.
Throwing a football. Okay.
Just wearing a bright yellow vest and a hard hat. Who knows? No one has to know. Who cares?
I
So let's
love
sneak
it.
it in. But with that being said, one thing that you never have to worry about being under construction, that is Alumni Hall, FSU, today's sponsor. Look, they are always elite gear over there at today's sponsor. So make sure you check those guys out in Tallahassee. Unfortunately, you won't be there for the spring game, but if you're in Tallahassee or around the surrounding area, it's 1415 Timber Lane Road. And if you're not going to Tallahassee now for the spring, you're still going to need some new gear for the fall.
That's
So
right.
go ahead and order online over there at alumnihall.com. Navigate over to the FSU page, or they even have an app to make the shopping experience even easier. Now, if you're going to shop over there, make sure that you use code SPEAR to save 10%. So we appreciate you guys supporting those that support us. And we appreciate Alumni Hall for rocking with us for all these years now. So,
Yeah.
Michael, let's get into some Cruton updates because it is obviously, you guys know as well as, if you've watched the show for any period of time, you know that we kind of scratch the surface when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, it's there. We don't do this full time, so we ain't sliding into no teenager DMs or anything like that. We ain't about that life. So like we're not around the Moore Center to know a lot of the ins and outs. So we pretty much talk about commits, ones we feel are close to committing, or at least they're really hot on the trail of. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We got 2 names for you that have already committed to the 2025 class as they continue to build this out. And the first one, of course, is a legacy commit that everyone should recognize this name because he shares the namesake with his father, and that is Antonio Cromartie Jr. Committed to Florida State last week, 3-star DB out of Carrollton, Georgia, 5'11", 170, and, comes in the number 166 ranked cornerback, according to 247. Michael, I was kind of like, I'm sure maybe you take this one because it's a legacy, right? Like you kind of look
Right.
3-star, not super high rated, but then you look at his numbers in high school, man, 85 tackles, 4 PBUs, 4 forced fumbles, and an interception. So obviously he was very productive in high school. And he's got a great bloodline, man. I mean, obviously everyone knows Antonio Cromartie, played at Florida State, All-American here at FSU, first-round NFL draft pick, 4-time Pro Bowl selection. So, I mean, I think legacies haven't worked out well for Florida State recently. That has been a little bit of the kind of the downer there. But with that being said, I mean, you still want to try and give every one of them a chance because you never know if it does hit, you're a shoe in to get that commitment. And for what it's worth, Antonio Cromartie has about 18 kids. So if you start if you start taking them now, 1 or 2 of them are eventually going to pan out. So Antonio Cromartie Jr., welcome to Knoll Nation, a part of the 2025 class.
Yeah, that's great. What a line that was. Yeah, he does have a lot of kids, that's for sure.
A lot.
A lot. He has a whole village. He could supply a whole city's worth of kids.
Yeah, he's got a 2 deep.
He's got a 2 deep. Yeah, listen, again, this is a legacy recruit. He's a 3-star guy. He's probably coming in, probably early on anything. If he even sees the field, he's a special teams guy. But, he could prove everybody wrong, as we often allow a player to prove themselves for, and he could rise up and become eventually a catalyst for this team. I don't see him having any playing time early on whatsoever. We already have a stacked DB room already. He's gonna be behind a lot of those guys, and you make a really good point about legacy recruits at Florida State. I mean, let's just go with the last 3 recently, in Lamont Green, Marvin Jones Jr., and Julian Armello. None of them. Marvin Jones Jr. played the most of all of them, and he was terrible. And then the other 2 rarely ever, if ever, saw the field. And so Florida State in the last several years has not had the best history with legacy recruits. But maybe with the new coaching staff, a new opportunity to reinvigorate kind of what they're doing, the stylistic how they play defense and offense, maybe this might be the thing that could help grow those legacy recruits. I think it's cool to get his son in the fold, but I don't have huge expectations of him to make an impact on the program.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I mean, DeKalin Brooks was another one,
Oh
undersized
yeah, that's right.
linebacker that really didn't do much for you. But you do have Camden Fryer right now, who is a
That's
legacy
right.
recruit that I do think is going to be good. I think more than anything, it's like, when you looked at when Marvin Jones Jr. went to Georgia, it was more of a bad look that you couldn't land a legacy recruit. So I think
Right.
by you taking them, at least it's a decent look for you to get them versus losing them.
Right.
So we'll see. I mean, like you said, he could certainly surprise. You never know. Obviously, he's got a good mentor as his father, who is the best of the best at the position. So hopefully that, he can end up being a contributor in a year or so, probably going to redshirt coming up. But the next recruit that we're going to talk about is always my favorite kind of recruit to talk about because it's on the offensive line and we
Yes.
always need all the help we can get. And that is Chavez Sandman Thompson. And I already love the name
Man.
Sandman. And apparently that's what he goes by. So offensive lineman brought to Florida State to play center is what they're looking at here. 3-star, number 73 interior offensive line, 6'1", 310 out of Cocoa, Florida. And, when you look at this kid, I think it's an intriguing prospect, right? He's a 2-year starter at Cocoa there. He's also a 4-year contributor at the former high school that he was at. So he's been, from a freshman, he's been a contributor the whole time. He started 10 games at center for Cocoa last year, who won their 3rd consecutive state title. So he's playing against good competition on a good team. What's really intriguing here, too, is he also played defensive tackle in 8 games there at Cocoa on a pretty
Okay.
stacked defense. And you're like, okay, well, he's probably just a big kid, big space eater. So you're going to want to get him on that defensive line because it's rare that you get some big, powerful kids at the high school level. Man, he's good at
Yeah.
defensive tackle. Like if center doesn't work out, this would be a very intriguing defensive tackle prospect. 61 tackles, 14 TFLs, 4.5 sacks,
Wow.
and 14 quarterback hurries at the defensive tackle position. So, man, I think this is a kid that definitely could have upside at 2 positions, whether one of them works out or not. And so now looking at him, the other thing that I like about Sandman here is he was also a district champion wrestler as a sophomore. And, when you're an offensive lineman and you're grabbing and moving people, that wrestling
Yeah, that
background
skill
is
set.
always great. And so he did not wrestle last year as a junior, but he will as a senior there at Cocoa. So I like that as well. Was previously committed to Oregon and then flipped his commitment. I think he was committed there for like 11 months.
Yeah.
Then he recently flipped to FIU, which is Florida International down there in Miami area. And was actually, from what I understand, was believed to walk in and be a day one starting guard for FIU. Now, of course, FIU is nowhere near where we're
Right.
trying to compete at, but it just tells you that, the kid is probably going to come in and start as a freshman somewhere else. There might be some value in this pickup. And now, of course, he flips to FSU literally like a week after he committed to FIU.
Right.
So, he's a little bit of a rambling man.
Yeah.
But, hopefully he stays with the Knowles. But, the thing was he had a previous relationship with FSU and
That's right.
Coach Han, who recruited him at UCF. And then things just kind of went the wayside. And then all the stars kind of came back together. The school
That's
he
right.
liked, the coach he liked ended up at the same spot. And, when I looked at the scouting report on him, he's undersized for, he's pretty good size for a center, right? He's still
Right.
short
Right.
at 6'1", but your center doesn't have to be a real massive guy. But the thing that makes him intriguing is he has really long arms and really big hands. He's got a powerful lower body and good body control, as you would expect with a wrestler. He plays aggressive. He's got quick feet, and he fits in really well with what Coach Han likes to do with his centers, with the inside zone blocking schemes and things like that. So this is a guy that's going to need some polishing. But I think after a redshirt year or 2, he could probably compete because, right now we don't really have a center. I mean, you have
Right.
Luke Pettibon that you brought in for 2025, which is why I say he can redshirt. You're not going to need him this year, the Wake Forest transfer. But other than that, you got Jacob Rizzi, who kind of played a little bit of fill-in center for you
Right.
last year. So you needed somebody at the position. But like I said, man, if it doesn't work out, I think, man, this is probably an intriguing prospect as a nose tackle there for Terrence Knighton if things don't work out on the offensive line.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I mean, you got basically a two-way player who could play both, who could either play on the offensive side or the defensive side if one or the other doesn't work out, especially if it's on the offensive side. again, like you said too, we also needed more bodies at center. We need to be able to have an opportunity to get these guys into practice to see which option gives us the best chance to win. And then if it doesn't work out on the offensive end, then of course, yeah, he has another opportunity to maybe to change positions and go to the defensive side of the of the ball and be able to operate out of there. What I'm impressed about him is just the offers. I mean, because you look at it and you think, oh, it's a 3-star guy. We're always getting these 3-star. This is not just a normal 3-star guy. I mean, he had offers from UCF, Miami, Oregon, committed there, Tennessee, Penn State, one of the best defenses in the country right now, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Maryland, Indiana, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, Iowa State, Louisville, University of South Florida, Toledo, Liberty, Florida Atlantic, FAU, Troy, Purdue, Middleton State, Marshall, FIU, UAB, and Amherst. I mean, okay, remove those latter, but
Yeah.
all the upper schools, I mean, those are some pretty good schools, and they were coming after this kid with also probably in the needed there. So this is no slouch of a kid. He's not a 4 or 5-star recruit, but he's probably one of those high-end 3-star players that can potentially down the road with the right development become a starter for you.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you can never have enough bodies to figure this whole thing out. And he
Right.
really loves Coach Hand, so that was an easy commitment for him and their plans for him there at center. So again, it's a position of need, not only on the offensive line, but at the center position on top of that. And so staying on the offensive line, now this is not a commit, but we're going to go with two top targets here for you that they're trying to work to get in this 2025 class. And the first one is an offensive lineman that recently received a crystal ball to land at Florida State, and that is 4-star offensive tackle Chasten Brown out of Warner Robins, Georgia, 6'7", 270 pounds. So got to add some mass to that frame. 270 still a little bit light, but man, 6'7", they don't make that every day of the week. He was originally committed to UCF before all the coaching change happened. Now, he is currently uncommitted, and he is expected to take an official visit to FSU in late January, but he has no other visits planned. So I think that's why this one is kind of seems like a lock and key for Florida State if everything goes well there. Number 351 nationally, number 29 offensive tackle per 247. So this is a really good prospect here. And the one thing that speaks volumes about Chasten Brown here is he just started playing varsity football in 2023. And so he's already up to a 4-star recruit. And he was named the Georgia Region 168 Offensive Lineman of the Year in 2023. So he obviously needs to add some mass and he needs to be developed. But I think, man, this is a huge upside potential play here by a guy who maybe doesn't have the most football experience, but has the measurables and the potential to be that starter for you in the future. You know, when I think of Chasten Brown here, the first name that comes to my mind is Lucas Simmons. This is the guy that came over, international kid, came to America, had not played American football very often, but man, he had measurables that were off the charts for an offensive tackle. And that's, of course, someone we want to see develop onto the field sooner than later because he does look like he could be a very high upside offensive tackle for you. So, man, again, this is another one, not a lot of experience, but if he's already a 4-star prospect, man, if you can get him in, and I think you're going to land him, that's going to be a good recruit for 2 to maybe 3 years down the road.
Yeah, I agree too. And I mean, all the on 3, 247, they all feel very good that this is probably going to happen. And again, look, the only thing you can do with this problem with the offensive line is continue to throw bodies at it. See if you can get a good mixture of starters, experience, and then have on the back end development around that. And I think Chasten Brown is a great candidate for long-term development under Herb Hand. We've seen the success Herb Hand has had with offensive lines. We've seen the success that Coach Malzahn has had with the running game, with being able to protect the quarterback, open up holes there. And so if they're going after a kid, I'm gonna assume and trust that this kid can provide some great benefit to what we're trying to do in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And then another one that they're after, flipping over, staying in the trenches, but on the defensive side of the ball, they are really in hot pursuit of this kid, and it would be a huge addition to this 2025 class. And that is Zaire Mathis, edge 6'5", 224-star out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Number 73 national recruit, number 6 edge in the 2024 or 2025 class, per 247. So, I mean, this is a big time recruit here. Former Ohio State commit. So he is coming off an official to FSU, and he will have an in-home visit with Mike Norvell coming up very soon as they're really pushing hard to land him. So from what I'm hearing here, he does have a visit coming up to UCLA, which has had to be moved around
Yeah.
with obviously the wildfires going on out there. And then he also has a visit to Michigan. Now, Michigan is obviously going to be one of those names that you're like, oh man, they are really kind of outspending everybody in NIL right now.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a tough pull. But actually, the name that I've heard to watch here to really look out for is Maryland.
Yeah.
Probably just close to home. Loxley's still a decent recruiter, but you would hope if Florida State wasn't coming out of the position that they were, you figure you could probably lock this one
Lock this
up.
up. Yeah.
But man, just being where you're at, even Maryland at whatever they are, 6-7 wins annually, they're kind of at a better place than you are right now in the Big Ten. But hopefully, this is someone that you can land. They're pushing really hard to get him, but man, this would be a huge get for the defensive line there, 4-star edge Zaire Mathis, excuse me.
Memphis. Yeah. I think everything I've understood and read about this recruit, they're really pushing really hard. Of course, Coach Pot Roast is really trying to bring this one home. Again, the competition is really stiff. Ohio State right now, according to On3, I know you're looking at 247. According to On3, Ohio State is the projected leader with about a 96% confidence meter. And then Penn State's kind of tailing the back end there too as well. Maryland is moving itself up, and of course Florida State's moving itself up. So this is going to come down to where does he feel most comfortable, probably also where is he getting the best NIL package in that sense. And so we'll see. Man, this would be a big get for that defense, especially on the edge side of that, to be able to bring this guy in. I'm not saying he's a day one starter, Jesse, but he's definitely got some snaps year one. And
I don't think you need him this year, but I think he could be someone that could be really in the conversation next year.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if On3 how often they update their rankings, because as an Ohio State decommit, it would be weird for him to go right back to Ohio State.
I think,
but
yeah,
I will say, you never know, man, because you look at things do change. You look at 2026 linebacker Isaiah Williams, who decommitted from Florida State, we just got named in his top 5.
Yeah.
And he's coming back for a visit, I believe, this weekend. So obviously, things change. Recruits' minds can change. Maybe something changes over there. So it will be interesting if he went back to the school he decommitted from. But, this would hopefully be one that you could land. And, this is another thing, talking about Isaiah Williams. That's one of the reasons why we felt that they really had to make a lot of staff changes, because if you just had that kind of stale turnover into 2025, a lot of these guys were like, man, nothing changed. And so now that at least you got some fresh blood in there on both sides of the ball, now you can even maybe reel in some of these fish that got off the hook the first time.
That's right.
Another name that Florida State is involved with that I don't project them landing is Ty Haywood, 5-star offensive tackle, recently decommitted from Alabama. From all signs right now point to Michigan being there, but he has visited Florida State. They are in conversations with him. So that's just a name to keep on your radar, maybe pretty far off the radar, but just keep that there. But those 4 are guys that, 2 have committed, 2 are on commit watch. Hopefully you can land them for the 2025 class, as they are not done yet. And it is a massive recruiting weekend coming up. Florida State is set to host almost 50 prospects this month alone in January. So they're working really hard. They've always been able to get some big guys on campus. It's just whether they can land them or not, because they even have 5-star number 1 linebacker Xavier Griffin, who's currently a USC commit, is going to be on campus, I believe, this weekend sometime or within this month. So, man, they got some big names coming in. So you hope they can make some progress with some of these guys, because it would be, this is what we've been asking for. We wanted the high school recruiting to tick up, and you're starting to see it. Again, this is a staff that came in on a whim, basically short notice, and on early signing day, took this class from the 50s up to the 21st ranked class. And so now they're continuing to add, because again, like we talk about, man, we always forget that the 2025 cycle is not over till February.
That's right.
And so there are some more guys that they can add. And, anytime you have coaching changes, guys decommit and go other places. So it'll be interesting to see. Right now, speaking of, Florida State's 2025 class is sitting at number 20 for 2025. It is at number 8 for 2026. Now, it's still a very small class, but if they can build some momentum, if you can win 8-ish games next year, I know that's not what we want to do, but I think it's good coming, from 2-10. If you can do that and get some momentum and you can finish with a top 10 class, that's what we've been asking for basically throughout Mike Norvell's tenure. I think you would have had it last year had the things not have fell apart the way that they did. But you're already sitting there at number 8 for 2026. But yeah, man, lots of moves on the recruiting trail. Lots of the staff is out visiting people, and so hopefully we see better rewards from the recruiting efforts under this new staff than
Right.
we did the last staff.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take a little bit of time, hopefully not too much time, but it's going to take a little bit of time for this recruiting staff to establish, or reestablish or deepen the relational ties that they have, especially to the state of Florida. Because a couple of them were out recruiting in Nebraska, and I'm sure they recognize they can only get so far in the state of Florida being out in Nebraska.
Right.
Now that they're here in Florida, they got the logo on them. They can walk into most schools, especially down in South Florida, recruit those kids, reestablish those relationship, and they're going to have to sell hope again. This is
Yeah.
back when Mike Norvell first got to Florida State. They had to sell hope. Here's what the program can look like if you were to come here, right? Then for a little bit they could sell results on the field. Well, then those results went to trash. So now they're back to selling, hey, we got a different staff, we got a different attitude, we got a different mantra when it comes to high school recruiting. We're going to put more emphasis on it. And so come be a part of this thing. Come help us fix this thing, right? So that's what they're going to have to sell. And I think you're going to see is a all-out effort to really bolster the high school ranks. That doesn't mean they're going to give up the portal. It doesn't mean that they're not going to leverage the portal, but I think the portal is not going to be the thing that saves a recruiting class every year anymore. I think the portal is going to be what it's supposed to be, which is a supplement to the high school recruiting. That's my projection right now. Now we'll see how that plays out. And again, if they don't win 8 games, it won't matter because they won't be here. And I know I'm saying that. I'm saying they've got to win 8 games. You can't win anything less than that. And I would love for them to win, 10 to be undefeated. But 8 games got to be a minimum.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think if the success can come back and you can, because at least the good thing is a lot of the offensive staff anyway came from the state of Florida.
That's right.
So they already have a lot of those ties. So all they really want to see is, can Florida State get back to their winning ways? You put together another terrible season and all that good momentum is going to be gone because you're selling that kind of that new car smell right now.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, look, this is what we did have success at one point. And so hopefully they can land a top 10 class for 2026 because that would really go a long way, man. If you could win 8 to 10 games and land a top 10 class in 2026, I mean, that's what we want, right? That tells you that Florida State is right back on the road. We got out of the ditch. The car's not on fire anymore, and we're okay.
That's right.
A little panic. So now, with that being said, let's transition into the next segment of the show, Michael. And this is, like I said, man, in the opening, we've talked a lot about Florida State. And Florida State, you got to get your stuff together, guys. Like that, it doesn't matter what anyone else does if you don't have your stuff together too. But one of the biggest aspects of how things can look for the next year is your opponents on the schedule and what they've done in the offseason. And there are a lot of other moves being made. And one of those moves is by the school down south. And that was by getting Carson Beck through the transfer portal. They also hired a new defensive coordinator, which is, it's funny because on the last show, we actually had a whole segment about Carson Beck, but it was in different context because he wasn't committed yet. And as soon as I started editing the episode, he commits to Miami. So we had to cut the whole thing. So now we're going to go back and we're going to talk about the moves that Miami has made in this new series where we're just going to kind of do like an off-season opponent checkup here to kind of look at, it's way too early, right? You still have a whole nother portal season to go. You still have a whole lot of different changes that could be made, but it's a good idea to just kind of do a status check on where the other programs are and where they're going to look at going into next year. So you can kind of start feeling out how maybe your competition is going to look. So obviously the headline news is Miami does land Carson Beck at quarterback. Now, obviously, as most of you guys know, he's coming off arm surgery. He will miss spring. He is rumored to be back throwing by summer. But the thing about Carson Beck for me is, look, we always trash on Miami. I get it. I'll be fair and honest. Look, he's good. He's better than what they had in Emory Williams. So he's going to be an instant upgrade. He's probably plus a few games of winning versus rolling out Emory Williams. He's not great. He's not Cam Ward. And we saw that they could not win the ACC or even make the ACC championship game with Cam Ward. So I don't know that Carson Beck is going to be the key that unlocks the success. I mean, they're sure spending money like he's the golden key. But, you look back at what he did at UGA last year, threw for almost 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, and was top 10 in QBR. So again, the guy's good. I'm not going to take that away from him. But he also threw 12 interceptions. He had 8 fumbles, and 9 of his touchdowns came against cupcakes against Tennessee Tech and UMass. He also had 2 of 5 touchdowns against Georgia Tech that came in an 8 overtime game. So he's not been perfect, but he's not been terrible either. Now, with that being said, UGA wide receivers were pretty terrible last year. 31 drops on the season. I mean, weren't great either, Michael.
Crazy to believe they were the worst. They were worse than Florida State.
And I almost say that it's close, right? Because I went back and looked because I was interested. We had 26 drops on 356 passing attempts. They had 31, but on 514 attempts. So slow down, UGA. That's still our crown to wear here. Obviously, he had a good season in 2023, but you also were throwing to Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, who are both doing very well in the NFL right now. So I think it's a good get for Miami. I mean, obviously, versus what you had, but I don't know that it's going to be the ticket to unlock a lot of success there. And really, the one thing for me, Michael, before we talk about the rest of Miami, is I still wonder how focused he's going to be on football down there. Obviously, most of you guys know his girlfriend is a basketball player down there. He's making a reported $10 million. And look, Athens is a college town, and UGA is a party school. There's plenty of ways to distract yourself up there, but it's not South Beach.
Yeah.
There's a lot of boats and booties in South Florida, Michael.
Yes.
And I've already seen him on a video on a boat out cruising the water down there on Twitter. So like, you just wonder how focused he's going to be. You know what I mean? Is it going to be ball, or is it going to be boats and booties? You just don't know, man. Because I mean, I don't know how old he is, but you're looking like 21 years old, $10 million, a Lambo, your girlfriend down there in South Florida. You can't even participate right now.
Right.
Like, man, how focused is he going to be? Now, I'm not trying to make an excuse. I'm just saying that, they couldn't do it with Cam Ward. So I don't know, man, but it's an upgrade from what they had.
For sure. I mean, when we talk about WAR, we've talked about this on the show before. Like, it's a baseball term, but it's basically wins above replacement. Does this player bring more wins on paper than what you currently had in the fold? And for sure, on paper, when you look at Carson Beck versus Emory Williams, for sure, you can say, oh, well, Carson Beck, his WAR has to be better and higher than Emory Williams was, for sure. But again, there's some context to that you have to talk about, that this was his worst season as a quarterback for starting at Georgia. Yes, he didn't have the greatest of wide receivers. Yes, his offensive line wasn't as great as it was before. And yet, he was able still to throw 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, but he had 12 interceptions this year. Those weren't on the receiver's fault. Those were his throws. He had 8 fumbles. That wasn't on the offensive line. That's him not being able to protect the ball. And of course, there are some games, if you watch, especially in games that actually mattered, where he just looked lost. He looked off. He was struggling. He couldn't make the right reads. I mean, it was just different. Now, that's not to say he's not a good quarterback. Okay. Will he be as effective and as highly good as Cam Ward was for Miami? I don't know. I'm not saying that either. I'm not saying he isn't or is. He is an upgrade over what they currently had in the fold with Emory Williams, for sure. And then when you talk about the NIL deal, now you're saying 10 million, but everything I've read was 4.4 million.
It's 10 million is all encompassing.
So it's the other deals.
Miami is around 4 million, but then there's other all encompassing
other things.
There's other deals. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he's making more than Bo Nix is making with an $18 million contract in the NFL. I mean, this is crazy that Miami is spending this money. And again, they're one of the highest paid rosters last season and went 10-2, couldn't go to the ACC championship, couldn't get into the playoffs, and lost to the Strawberry Pop-Tarts. So, I mean, like, again, they're going out and spending more money for a quarterback who's coming off an injury, who they won't be able to see until the summertime. They won't have springtime with him, and then they're going to get him into the offense. I saw, it's not like they're bringing back the best of their wide receivers for next year. I know we'll dive more into that later on in the offseason, but again, I'm curious as to I'm curious as to what their success formula is for spending this much money, knowing they're still needing to go get other players to hopefully fill out what they don't have. And then again, of course, I know we're talking about the other side of the ball as well too. But it listen, Miami, spend what you want to spend. You got 21 years of history of not doing much with it anyway. So, kudos to you for winning the Carson Beck Trophy of the offseason.
Right. Yeah. And it was 10-3. Let's not forget that third
Yeah,
loss
10-3. That's right.
but they had a glass of orange juice with their loss to the Pop Tarts, and
That's
then got
right.
stung by a bee too. But so yeah, I mean that's the thing is I know he was making rumored to be around 3 million at UGA, and I also saw an interesting thing too that UGA actually did kind of want him back, and Alabama did reach out as well, and we had talked about in the segment that got deleted that we thought Alabama was up there too because they need a quarterback
They
as
need a
well.
quarterback
So
in the worst way.
I won't say that it's great for Florida State that they got Carson Beck down at Miami because obviously, like you said, his WAR is better than that of Emory Williams. But I don't think it's going to make them elite, right? Everyone says that, it puts them as a contender immediately. And I don't think that's the case. And, when you said later in the offseason, by that, I mean right now, because I actually did the research on it. And this is why I find it so interesting, right? They brought in Carson Beck. But Michael, the rest of the team took advantage of that year and dipped. They lost their top 4 receivers from last year. They are all gone. Restrepo, who led in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, he's gone. Jacoby George is gone. Isaiah Horton is gone. Sam Brown is gone. Your leading tight end, Elijah Arroyo, he's gone. Your running back, Damian Martinez, who was a 1,000-yard rusher, had 10 touchdowns and was your lead receiving back. He's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So you bring in Carson Beck, but here's what's interesting. Those 6 players combined right there that I just named, they combined for 83.9% of the total receiving yards for Miami last year and 80.5% of their touchdowns. So not only are you bringing in Carson Beck, who's a brand new quarterback coming off surgery, who can't participate in spring, has to learn a new offense, and has to get new, chemistry with the receivers that you thought were there.
Right.
None of them are there. So now you have new receivers too. So it's good, man. It's really interesting. I know they brought in one transfer from LSU who had less than 500 yards last year. So they did fill one hole there. I also do believe they are losing their starting center and Jalen Rivers, who started 8 games at left tackle for them last year. So, man, I mean, Carson Beck you got him and a couple of offensive linemen, and then the rest of that offense is going to be question marks, and do keep in mind, they start with Notre Dame next year. So you're going to have to learn it fast, and you're going to have to do it on a condensed window because he can't start participating until at least the summertime. And if they, maybe they're going to just go with their high school recruits that they have because, they have recruited well. But if they're going to bring anything else in from the portal, it's going to have to be in that spring portal session because right now they've only taken really one impact wide receiver transfer.
Well, and the other side of this too is, one of the things that I don't think Miami got enough credit for, and I hate to even give them credit, but they had a really good offensive line this year. That allowed Cam Ward to literally have months in the pocket. You know, he didn't have to scramble as much as he normally would have when he was out at Washington State because they had a really good offensive line. But Carson Beck isn't Cam Ward, bro.
No,
he can move, but he can't move like Cam Ward could. And so you're hoping that if you don't have the type of receivers that are going to get open and get separation so he can throw the ball to him, this guy's going to have to be running in some ways a little bit for his life, depending on how that offensive line shakes out in the new season. And like you just said, they're going to start with maybe potentially the defending national champion next season, who's only gotten better through the portal and high school recruiting. So I'm really curious to see how they plan to make this work out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's the thing when they were like, oh, it's a contender. And this is why to me, this is why you start looking at the competition, right? Because you're sitting here thinking like, all right, well, your games next year that are going to be tough. You got Bama, you got Clemson, you got Florida, you got Miami. And then you start looking around, you're like, wow, Miami lost literally half their team. And so it's like that to me is why you do this. That's why you start looking. Now, obviously, we don't know what it's going to look like by the time fall rolls around, and we'll have to update this later. But again, man, you lost basically everybody, all your production from last year, and you bring in Carson Beck, hoping that's just going to, magically fix things when, Restrepo was a really good receiver for them.
Yeah, he was.
And Cam Ward was probably a generational quarterback, number 1 in QBR last year, set the all-time passing record for touchdowns at FBS or something like that. And, and you went 10-3 with that. So
that's right.
It will be interesting to see. Now, on the other side of the ball, to talk about them, they did hire a new DC because that DC was not good. I think this is what their third and 4 years or something.
Yeah,
like
I think
that.
so. Yes.
And so he comes in, Corey Heatherman. formerly of Minnesota, spent one season there with the Golden Gophers in 2024. Prior to that, he was the Rutgers linebacker coach for 2 years. And then he was James Madison's DC from 2019 to 2021 when they were still in the FCS. And then Maine's DC there from 2016 to 2018. So he does have some experience as a DC, but only one season of experience as a Power 4 DC. And that was there at Minnesota. Now, Minnesota had a great defense last year by a number standpoint, 9th in scoring defense, 9th in passing defense, and 12th in rushing defense. With that said, they also share a very similar concern that I even had with Tony White coming from the Big Ten. You don't face a lot of great offenses depending on how the scheduling goes in the Big Ten. 0 top 25 offenses faced last year, 2 in the top 50. One was Penn State. And I mean, let's be honest, that offense, it hadn't looked great in the playoffs, right?
Exactly.
And then UNC, who lost their quarterback in the first half of that game and had to put in an unprepared backup. So, yes, you did face them as a top 50 offense, but it was kind of, an emergency backup plan there. And he gave up 31 points to Iowa. The thing about Minnesota is he did take their defense from 69th in 2023 up to 9th. But prior to that, Minnesota's defense was 4th in 2022 and 6th in 2021. That 2023 year is because they faced a lot tougher schedule. You had UNC with Drake May. You had Michigan. You also had Ohio State on the schedule as well. So that's why you had that drop off there. So, the point is he did take over a pretty good defense to begin with. And then you go into next year. Miami's defense was terrible last year. That's really what kind of kept them from being successful with Cam Ward. So I know you're not going to cry over a lot of their guys being gone, but still, he comes in as a new DC, another new system, 3rd in 3 years. And you lost because their last one was only there for 1 year. You lost both starting safeties, your starting slot corner, the linebacker who led you in tackles the past 2 years, your leader in TFLs. 3 of the top 4 of them are gone. 2 of the top 3 in sacks because there was a 3-way tie. The top 2 in snaps on the interior defensive line. And then one thing that I think is really underrated here is they also lost Borregales, their kicker, who has been great for them for a really long time. So, man, I mean, you've got to replace almost your entire offense. And now you're having to bring in a new DC, replace a lot of the good players that you had on that defense. Another kicker too. And again, you open with Notre Dame. So, just again, when you step back and you look at all the things they've lost, Michael, you think about a team that was successful 1 year, lost a ton of players to the draft and all that type of stuff, and then came back next year. That sounds like a team that we went a whole 2-10 after that. So I'm not saying Miami's going to go 2-10, but man, you have lost really the core group of what made you successful.
Yeah, they really did. And so, I'm really curious to see how this is all going to shake out. Now, again, as you said earlier, unfortunately, they have recruited well over the last several years, or at least under Cristobal's tenure there. They've recruited really well. They went out in the portal. They got 6 defensive players, highlighted by the best of defensive player, which is Charles Brantley, who was a 4-star cornerback who transferred in from Michigan State. It was kind of the highlight of their defensive side of their transfer portal recruiting there. And so I know they're going to try to replace some of that production with what they brought in the transfer. And then I imagine that they're going to probably start leveraging some of the high school recruits there as well too. But it'd be really curious to see if this defensive coordinator can string together a decent defense that doesn't get lit up, because they were basically getting lit up every single game. So I'm curious to see how they get those 6 players to kind of integrate into this new defense, as well as the offensive side, or well as the other high school recruits that they're going to try to integrate into this defensive side. But I'm also hoping, Jesse, that they just got their version of Adam Fuller. That'd be nice.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, again, like, he looks good on paper, but there's not a lot of experience there at the Power 4 level. And so it will be interesting to see how it plays out. And, like you said, man, eventually you do want to see teams, the Florida State as well, transition into putting your high school recruits on the field. I just think it's going to be an entirely different conversation or path that they're going to have to take this year, because, you came in last year and you had a proven 1,000-yard rusher. You had a proven quarterback. You had all these guys who said they were going to come back. Restrepo, the Maui Noah, the linebacker, and all these guys. You put together our 2023 team essentially and went 10-3 because everybody
That's
came
right.
back. And then now you're going to be coming into this season with a lot less proven pieces. Now they, like
That's
you
right.
said, they may go out and get a few more. It remains to be seen, but it's just going to be interesting, man, to for people to really be putting them out there as an early contender already. I'm pumping the brakes on that right now. So, as we go through each team, we're going to try and do like one or maybe two, if we can squeeze it in there per week, just to give you guys an early look, and just to tease, one of the ones we got coming up is Clemson. Look, I'm a little bit worried about that Clemson game next
Yeah.
year because they
Yeah.
bring back a lot and they've done some good things. They actually took some transfers from the this year
Yes,
from the
they did
portal. So
finally.
it's surprising. But yeah, man, I just really think when I look at that Miami, just the whole offseason that they've had so far, everything that they lost, bringing in a hurt quarterback and a new DC and kind of starting over there. I just, man, it looks different, right? And I think that it makes you feel, obviously, we have a long way to go
That's
ourselves, but
right.
if you can get back to business as usual, it does make you feel a little bit less concerned about that game, knowing that you also get them inside Doak Campbell Stadium. So
That's right.
it's just interesting. And again, like I said, guys, this is not the plant the ibis
Right.
show or anything like that, but I do think that, when you really start to dig into what these teams have done in the offseason, you start to really look around and you're like, okay, well, a big part of what we did last year, we talked about was one of the things that I said, you had a lot of quarterbacks that were
That's
coming
right.
back. You had a lot of teams in 2023 that had backup quarterbacks
That's
playing or
right.
first year quarterbacks playing. So you got to look at who else is around you because that schedule
Right.
was tough last year. And so when you really start to look at the opponents ahead of you, that's where I think you can really kind of form an opinion like, okay, well, let's just say Florida State gets back to not that last
That's
year.
right.
You get back to an 8 to 10 win type of program, but then you got to look at what your schedule is, what your
That's
level of
right.
competition is. And
That's
so,
right.
man, I had been so busy keeping up with FSU that I really hadn't taken the time to look at Miami. And then when I
That's right.
started, I saw, okay, they got Carson Beck. I'm like, all right, he's good, not great, probably not good for us.
Right.
Then I started looking at everything else and I was like, oh, wow, they lost a ton. So it
Right.
just changes my opinion on where they're at for 2025 as well. And of course, when it changes your opinion on them, it can change your ceiling as well.
Correct. Absolutely. And to No Nation there, you should pay attention to this because if you remember last year, we were going into the offseason, we started to do something like this in the same vein of looking at the other teams. And Jesse was the first of all the media outlets out there. Jesse was the first to tell us that, hey, this Georgia Tech team, some of these teams that we're going to play this year, they're not slouches. And so we can't just go ahead and pencil. And I was like, oh, no, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. And Jesse's like, no, I've been doing the research. Now, again, we all, because of we were blinded, all said, oh, but we should be able to get through them. And then we ended up 2-10. So if Jesse is saying, hey, like we should really pay attention to certain things, we should be paying attention to certain things because it's telling us something early on. And so I just want to make sure we understand that as we go into the offseason.
Yeah, it's funny because I never saw 2-10 coming by all means,
No
but
one did.
I do know that when we went and did our like schedule reveal episode, we talked about every team. Someone had even commented because they were like, "You're saying to watch out for literally every single team other than like Charleston Southern," and I'm like, "That's because almost every single team is better than I think we're giving them credit for. Even Cal, I even
That's
thought
right.
Cal was going to be a tough one. And SMU, I was worried about them because I thought they were going to be a real contender the first year. And so again, like that's why I look within, but then I look around because
Yeah.
that tells me a lot more about anything than what you got coming up on the schedule next year. So
Yeah.
that is going to be the first of our kind of early offseason opponent preview. I don't even really know what to call the segment,
Yeah.
Michael, but we'll try and squeeze in one or two more. I thought Miami, we should have maybe went with the order to schedule, but we don't know what it is yet.
Right.
Although hopefully we'll be finding out soon. The schedule should drop within the next 2 weeks, but with the Carson Beck news, I thought Miami was a good place to start. Of course, we'll talk about some of the top games like Clemson coming up. We also have Alabama has had lots of
right.
changes that we're going to talk about as well, too. So hopefully you guys, I know that's a lot of talk about a team that's not Florida State, but hopefully you guys enjoy kind of getting the nuts and bolts of what's going on the schedule for 2025 as well. So also, Michael, before we get out of here, this feels so crazy to even talk about, right? Because it feels like our season ended 6 months ago.
It
And
really
somehow
did.
we are still playing football out here. So I almost forgot to even slip it in, but the national championship is coming up in just 3 days. So with that, Ohio State, Notre Dame, who you got, Michael? And I think we're probably going to roll with the same one here. Man, this is like I wish I could pick neither one because I don't really care for either school, but I'm going to go with Ohio State to win.
Okay. Well, listen, I think Ohio State, I mean, they have shown just a difference since that Michigan game. They've been a
Yeah.
completely different team. They've been unstoppable. I mean, that game they played against Texas was really good, but the script sack fumble was like the thing to do that. I think Notre Dame's a really good team. I think Marcus Freeman's a really good coach. Florida State has not beaten Notre Dame in a while. It's frustrating. Ohio State is an 8.5 point favorite in this game.
Mhm.
I think it's much closer than the experts think, but I do think that offense with all those wide receivers, NFL type wide receivers, ends up winning today. I have Ohio State pulling it out in the last drive of the game.
I like it, man. Hopefully, what I hope happens, because I really don't care either team. Uh, Maybe Ohio State wins and it makes Notre Dame extra mad, and they all come back for one more run, and then they pulverize Miami in the first
That's
game.
right.
That would make me the happiest. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be a really good game. Two good defenses. I think Ohio State gets the edge on offense, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, because man, that Notre Dame offense has just struggled
Yes, it
mightily.
has.
Riley Leonard is not a very great quarterback, so I think you give the edge at quarterback and offense to Ohio State, and I think they win this one. So
Yeah.
also, one little bit of news before we jump out of here as well. Baseball season is less than a month away, so we'll be ramping up coverage on that as well. Florida State brings in a couple of top 10 preseason rankings. They come in at number 6 via perfect game and number 9 via D1 baseball ranking. So really excited there as well. I believe I even saw FSU softball was around number 10 as
Yeah.
well too. So they're going to look to have a bounce back season. Got a lot of players that we're excited about. So we'll be talking about that coming up. So yeah, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure you check out plantthespear.com. I just published a baseball article over there. We're knocking out articles for all the recruits to give you an inside look at them as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. And rate and review on the podcast helps us reach other Knoll fans. So we appreciate you guys spreading the word. We appreciate a lot of the nice comments that we've got from you guys
Yeah.
lately, man. Really, really touching stuff, right? Because we do this out of the love for Florida State.
That's right.
Even when it's a love-hate relationship like last year, we still do it. So we appreciate you guys rocking with us. Make sure you check out Alumni Hall FSU for some elite FSU gear and save 10% by using code SPEAR. So with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for us today. We'll catch you on the next one. As always, go
Go
Knowles.
Knowles.